Hello and welcome to another angst-filled episode of Saved by the 90s. My name is Adam Patterson. I'm joined today by recent high school graduate, Ken Bakley. Hey, Ken.
Hello.
School is in session this month as we discuss 4 high school movies released in March of 1999. So gather up those awkward teen memories. This is Saved by the 90s.
Wearing his Chuck Taylor Koosh fling shots, Billy has successfully picked off 14 gazillion dolls belonging to his sister Sally, making him this week's Converse Koosh All-Star. The Converse Koosh Collection, now available.
The 90s were a great decade for the teen movie, with a treasure trove of cinema classics released. Too many to cover in just one episode. But March of 1999 saw the release of 2 iconic teen flicks, a movie version of a beloved TV series, and the rage Carrie 2.
You'll immediately know our first film this month when I tell you it's based on a classic novel originally published in 1782. But if you still need some help, mentioning its steamy cast featuring Sarah Michelle Gellar, Ryan Phillippe, Selma Blair, and Reese Witherspoon, that should jog your memory. This is Cruel Intentions.
Everybody does it. It's just that nobody talks about it.
Check your hormones at the door. Critics are calling Cruel Intentions one of the sexiest, most fun movies of the year.
Why don't you make yourself more comfortable?
Wait a minute.
It's sharp, witty, and wickedly funny.
I'm taking a shower.
Want any company?
Yes!
Sensational.
You don't get to have all the fun.
Steamy.
He's telling you the truth.
And 100% entertaining.
I thought we should celebrate.
Cruel Intentions.
It's quite intriguing.
Rated R.
Released on March 5th and directed by Roger Kumble, Cruel Intentions involves 2 vicious step-siblings of an elite Manhattan prep school who make a wager to deflower the new headmaster's daughter before the start of term. All right, Adam, let's start off with you. What did you think of Cruel Intentions?
I really like Cruel Intentions. I
do too.
This is a movie that, and this is going to be sort of a reoccurring theme this month. It's a movie that when it initially came out, I had zero interest in it. And I don't think I actually saw this movie until at least a couple years after its initial release. And I remember the first time I saw it thinking, no, that's all right. You know, that's fine. It's whatever. But revisiting it for this show, I think I have sort of a new appreciation for it. It's a very fun movie, and it's funny, like, because this is the first time I ever heard that TV spot, or the first time I actually remember that TV spot. And when you listen to it, it makes it sound like it's sort of a almost like a goofball comedy. It seems like it's so much fun in this, and these wacky kids. What are they up to? But it's not quite at that level, but it is a little bit more fun than I remember it being.
Oh yeah, I also had that experience where the rewatch was better than the first watch, except I only saw this movie for the first time, I think last year, but then I watched it again, and I really just enjoyed, frankly, how brilliantly absurd it is. Like, the dialogue in this movie is just spectacular.
It really is. And I also don't know if I ever really appreciated Selma Blair's character quite as much until I rewatched it for this. Her character is so incredible. She's so incredible in this, playing the sort of aloof daughter of this rich woman. Her name's Cecile Caldwell. She was great.
Oh yeah, there's like a really good, just not only a lead cast, there's just a good supporting cast in this movie, because it feels like everybody kind of understands the level at which this movie is being pitched and generally meets it, which goes a really big way in making it enjoyable and not just flat. Because there's a very easy way to make this movie where it just seems uninteresting and that it can't live up to its premise. But this movie lives up to its premise by embracing just how much of a mess it is.
Yeah. I couldn't say it better than that. It features a cast of people who are well aware of what they're doing in this. Ryan Phillippe just hams it up. They all just ham it up for the camera, and it just seems like they all have such a good time. I mean, I guess Ryan Phillippe and Reese Witherspoon certainly did, because I think they ended up getting married after meeting on this movie.
Yeah.
I think they had like at least one kid together.
Yeah, they had kids. Like, I did not fully realize that they were married at some point until looking it up relatively recently.
Yeah, I think they married in 1999. They married shortly after this movie came out.
Mm.
So they must have really hit it off.
Yeah.
So just stepping back, if you're not familiar with Cruel Intentions, figured we could dive into the plot a little bit, such as it is. So Ryan Phillippe and Sarah Michelle Gellar, they play step siblings. Now, I was under the impression that it was Ryan Phillippe's dad who was the rich one, and Sarah Michelle Gellar, her mom married into the wealth. But because that's sort of the way they made it sound at the beginning. However, after seeing the sequel, I learned that it was the other way around, that Ryan Phillippe actually came from a more modest background and married into the wealth of Sarah Michelle Gellar's mom. And they attend this prep school, as the synopsis mentions, but you don't really see that at all until the end.
It's really the epitome of the kind of school where everyone's parents are paying $500,000 to have someone else take their kids' SATs for them.
Yeah. I was thinking about that as I was watching this. I was like, oh, this is definitely one of those situations.
I apologize to anyone listening in 3 years that has forgotten about that, but
Right.
Google it.
So they're step siblings. They're sort of the quintessential bored rich white people who they're so rich that their lives have absolutely no meaning, and they can't gain any kind of emotional fulfillment out of anything. So they set up challenges like sexual conquests for one another, and the bet that they have is so Sarah Michelle Gellar, sort of the one person that Ryan Phillippe can't have because it's his stepsister, and it's icky.
Yeah, I love how that conceit is just quickly established as fact, and like the movie barely makes a big deal over how unsettling that is
right away. Like the first scene, like right off the bat. Actually, I think the first scene is like him with the therapist, but like right after that sequence, they very quickly establish their kind of sexual chemistry with each other, which is awkward. I mean, that's the thing. This was a very infamous movie when it came out. This was the talk of the town, this movie, and everybody was talking about the incest angle that happens in this movie or is implied. And it turns out that it's not even that big of a deal, really. They always like come close, but they never quite go there with it,
which almost makes it more unsettling in a way.
Yeah,
because there's the
the tension is always there, like
knowing that it could happen at any second.
Right, like every 15 minutes or so, there's this very steamy scene between the two of them where they're getting really close. Like, and you're thinking to yourself, is it going to happen? Is this going to finally happen? Am I going to see this? But they always pull back. So Ryan Phillippe decides that the next hardest conquest for him is to get Reese Witherspoon's character in bed. She plays this Kansas debutante, I guess, named Annette Hargrove, and she's dating a guy, and she writes this piece for, I don't remember which magazine, but it was essentially talking about how she was saving herself for marriage. And it just so happens that she moves to New York and is staying with Ryan Phillippe's aunt in her giant mansion. So they have a connection. So he goes after her, and the rest of the movie is just him trying to sleep with her. But guess what? He falls in love with her. Mm-hmm. It happens. He falls in love with her, and things change. And then he gets hit by a car and dies. which I totally forgot that happened. And it comes out of nowhere and feels so unnecessary that you're just like,
I mean, at least in the actual in the original, novel, Dangerous Liaisons, he dies in a duel. He doesn't just get, but here it's just like, random, he just gets run over.
Yeah. It comes out of nowhere. I was hoping you were going to tell me that in the original novel he gets run over by a horse or something.
I wish he did.
Hilarious. He just has a random encounter with a stampeding horse, and it tramples him.
Yeah. The one constant in all adaptations is that it's just completely random and by some kind of transportation-based accident.
So he's keeping this diary of all of his conquests, and he talks about all the women and all of the stuff, and it's just every little thing. It's a very intricate diary too. It's got pictures, it's got collages, it's a very well crafted diary, and he ends up giving it to Reese Witherspoon, who then publishes it as a book and distributes it. But before she publishes it as a book, she distributes it to everyone at his funeral, and it essentially ruins Sarah Michelle Gellar's life as a result. I'm assuming it ruins her life.
I mean, it's not exactly complimentary.
No, you do get some hints as to what happened to her in Cruel Intentions 3, which I'll talk about in a bit.
Yeah, you got to get to Cruel Intentions 2 first.
Well, so Cruel Intentions 2 is actually a prequel to the first one. It's interestingly, Cruel Intentions 2 is written and directed by Roger Kumble.
Just couldn't get out of the Cruel Intentions extended.
No, you got roped right into that. It was straight to video. Came out in 2000, and it starred Amy Adams as Catherine. So Amy Adams was in the Sarah Michelle Gellar role, which I thought was very odd. And Robin Dunn is in the Sebastian role. Both of these actors look nothing even close to the original actors who portrayed these characters. And it takes place at the school, and it is when he first meets, he was living with his mom. Sebastian was living with his mom, and his mom ends up going into rehab, and he has to move in with his dad, and that's how he meets his sister Catherine.
Now it says here that it was originally shot as a TV show for Fox. It was shot as a series to be broadcast the year the movie came out. So they immediately ordered a series of this, and then they didn't air it, so they edited it into a direct to video film. I guess they just edited their however many shows they'd ordered and made into a movie. So if you ever are asked the question, what do Cruel Intentions 2 and Mulholland Drive have in common?
Well, it's interesting. That's also kind of odd because Cruel Intentions 2 features a lot more like nudity and sort of overt sex scenes and stuff. Whereas
I guess that would have been added later.
the original Cruel Intentions actually didn't really have much nudity. I don't think it had any nudity.
Yeah, it's not. There's not a lot. There is some, but not a lot.
It also, the sequel basically negates everything that happened in the first one. Like going back to the sort of love between the step siblings, like they get close for it to happen, but in the prequel, it just straight up happens. Like they're making out all the time, and it's just it's ridiculous the way that it.
Might that be part of the reason that Fox didn't want to pick it up, or they actually want to air it?
And maybe, I'm not sure.
I don't know. There's a story there that we don't know.
And that's for Cruel Intentions 2, not the 2016 TV series.
Yes.
Okay, because there was also a 2016 TV series that takes place like 12 years after the events of the first one, and that does have Sarah Michelle Gellar. That also was a pilot that wasn't picked up. It's now listed as a TV movie. However, it was never aired. I tried to find it, but I couldn't find it.
The timeline of this entire like franchise of programs and movies is just so weird.
It is. I mean, back then, when you had a popular movie, you better make a sequel, even if it makes no sense to make a sequel. Like there's no common sense. Oh yeah, Cruel Intentions 2. It's a no-brainer. Like, it's just something that shouldn't happen. It shouldn't exist. I feel like as many sequels and reboots as we get in this day and age, it's still not as bad as what it once was. And they made 3 of them. There's a third one too.
There's a third one.
So the third one has nothing to do with the original other than
perfect.
It has nothing to do with the original other than an offhanded reference at the beginning where it's these two characters who are talking about aspiring to be like Sebastian and Catherine. Mm. And that's when you find out that Catherine she becomes like a drug addict and ends up in rehab or something.
So I'm guessing another example of a movie that was not based on a script that was not intended to be a sequel, but they thought it was close enough that they tried to tie it in.
I would suspect. Now the Cruel Intentions 2 follows the exact same beats as the original one. It plays. It's almost like a spoof. The second one, like I mean, it follows everything almost to a T, where you like have the opening scene with Sebastian screwing somebody over, like screwing over an authority figure. That happens in this one. There's like same lines that are delivered. Mm-hmm. It's very, very much the exact same. Whereas the third one sort of deviates. The only thing that even makes it remotely connected is that it's two guys who are competing, like they have a challenge that they're trying to sleep with these two friends of theirs. So yeah, it very well could be something that they just were like, hey, let's slap on the Cruel Intentions name. Mm-hmm. That one's horrible. It takes place in Santa Barbara. I don't know if these are supposed to be like filthy rich kids like the other ones, but everything feels very cheap in it. No cleverness. Like the thing that I enjoyed about the first movie is that they were clever, right? They knew how to manipulate people and they knew what they wanted and they were always thinking several steps ahead, and their plans were actually pretty clever. Well, in the third one, there is no cleverness. The way the one guy gets the woman he's trying to get with, so she has a boyfriend and he ends up taking the boyfriend's place on this like field trip for school, and he the way he gets her is by having her flip a coin and deciding who's master and who's slave. And like, she's not even into it. She's not even into this. She has a boyfriend.
That's not
So
how that
so he
works.
flips the coin and she wins. And he goes, "Do you want to be the master or the slave?" And she goes, "The slave." And then they just proceed to do their thing. And the other guy, the way that he gets the girl is he pays a guy to sleep with her, and then he takes pictures of it. And by the way, she has a fiance. Pays a guy to sleep with her. He takes pictures of it. Then he approaches her, shows her the pictures, and says, "I have them in a place in the school. If you tell anybody, I'm going to send them out." And then he proceeds to rape her.
Oh,
And that's how. And I'm like, okay, well, this just entered some sort of really dark territory that I wanted the incest again. Like, I was ready to go back to the incest of the first one.
I missed the halcyon days of consensual incest.
He does get his, though, because the twist in that movie is that
Does he get run over by a horse?
No, he doesn't. But he does get arrested and charged with rape, because turns out the other friend who wanted to be like Catherine or whatever from the beginning, turns out it was actually, the challenge was between like the main guy and her, and she tricked him into sleeping with her, and then she pinned a rape on him. So she called the police and she said she was raped, even though it was consensual. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's horrible.
That's a lot to take in. That is a movie that has a lot to unpack there.
It's really bad, and
That's upsetting.
the part 2 is really bad too. To be clear, they're both horrible, and they're not even anywhere close to the original, which I think is funny, because it makes more sense now that you say it was going to be originally a TV show, because it doesn't look like a movie at all. It doesn't really feel like a movie other than the R-rated aspects of it. Anyway, I really liked revisiting Cruel Intentions. I didn't think I would, but I had a pretty good time with it.
It's a good time.
Let's play Furby Says.
Tickle, pet, nanny, nanny,
Furby plays with you.
Furby wins.
And with each other, too.
Parky, Orky.
Furby, each sold separately. Batteries not included.
Our next feature is also adapted from a classic work of literature, this time Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew. Directed by Gil Younger and featuring a well-rounded cast including Julia Stiles, Heath Ledger, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, and Larissa Olniak, this is 10 Things I Hate About You.
Daddy, now as you know, it's the prom.
The only thing more difficult than taking out Bianca.
New rule. Bianca can date, and she does.
She's a mutant. What if she never dates?
And you'll never date. Oh, I like that.
Is finding someone with the courage to tame her sister.
Hey! Me with my arm around you.
You covered in my vomit.
On March 31st.
I've never seen you look so sexy.
10 Things I Hate About You.
Stay cool, bro.
Rated PG-13. Starts March 31st.
As that trailer stated, this was released on March 31st and concerns a pretty popular teenager who can't go out on a date until her ill-tempered older sister does. Ken, what did you think of 10 Things I Hate About You?
This is a movie that I know everyone says it looking back, but this is definitely a fun movie to look back at just because of the cast. Like, it's one where you look at and you realize that basically everybody in it became really famous.
Yeah.
At least in like the principal cast.
Yeah, pretty much. I thought it was interesting that you have Julia Stiles and Heath Ledger playing the kind of weird outcast kids. Like, they were like the weird, unpopular kids. I'm like, what world would Heath Ledger and Julia Stiles be the odd kids that nobody really likes. And I love at the beginning when they were coming up with the plan and they were trying to figure out who to set Julia Stiles' character up with. And they were like, that guy. And they're like, oh no, not that guy. And it's like, are you kidding me? Look at this guy. Look at him. Why not try that guy?
Yeah.
Oh my. I really liked this movie. This is another one that, so just for the backstory on this, I was 15 years old when this movie came out. And during that time, I was beginning to enter my sort of movie snob phase. And I seem to remember completely railing against this movie, just like, no, like, that looks so stupid. But I remember I ended up watching it shortly after it came out. I didn't see it in the theater, but probably whenever it came out on video. And I remember thinking like, oh, this is actually pretty decent. And revisiting it now, I still feel the same way. I think that it is one of the best teen comedies of the 90s, certainly.
Oh, absolutely. It's well crafted, and
I like how they incorporate they don't specifically incorporate the Shakespearean language into the movie, but they drop lots of little breadcrumbs in there for you to follow into the Shakespearean story. And the dialogue is certainly more sophisticated than most teen movies.
Yeah, there's a general rhythm to the movie that definitely feels, it almost does feel Shakespearean, just in terms of like rhythm and pace and whatnot, and just the rate at which things are going.
Yeah, and I really appreciate that. During this time, there were a lot of these modernized Shakespearean stories, and I thought a lot of them didn't particularly work. And I think that this is one that rode the line in a very interesting way. Little callbacks, little Easter eggs, little Shakespearean Easter eggs throughout. And I thought it was pretty funny too. There were a lot of scenes that actually still made me laugh, even to this day. But a lot of the comedy was really random. Like, there's these random physical comedy gags with goofy sound effects that they throw in there. Like and it just doesn't make any sense at all. I'm like, why? What? Like the scene where she shoots the teacher with the arrow. She shoots him right in the butt with the arrow.
I think there is a sense that it's very much trying to go entirely through Shakespeare, and a big part of that would just be very silly, highly delivered comedy and bits like that. So I think that's almost a way to try and modernize that style through sort of these like throwaway physical gags.
Perhaps, yeah. I mean, I remember reading Taming of the Shrew back in high school, but I don't remember anything about it. So maybe there was a scene where she shot her teacher in the butt.
I don't believe there's anyone getting shot randomly with an arrow in the play. But
there should be, clearly.
I mean, there should be. Like, why doesn't Dangerous Liaisons have anyone getting run over by a horse?
So there's also that scene when she was trying to sneak Heath Ledger out of detention, and before this scene occurs, the teacher, it's the same guy who got shot in the butt, approaches this kid, and he's like all sweaty, and he grills this kid into giving up the weed that he has. Now, first of all, why does this scene exist in the movie? They spend like 5 minutes on him interrogating this kid to give up his weed, and then they show him taking Cheetos from another kid, obviously implying that he's going to smoke the weed himself. But it's like, why do we don't even know this teacher. Like we saw him in one scene where he got shot in the butt with an arrow, And
I guess if every movie had to have a sequel, then that's who the sequel was going to be about, and they were just setting it up.
probably. So I found a lot of those beats to be very strange and unnecessary, but a lot of the other stuff I thought was pretty funny. A lot of the dialogue based humor worked for me. Larry Miller as the dad, I thought he was great as the dad.
Oh yeah.
The scene when he makes Larissa Olnick's character put on the pregnancy vest thing. He's like, just wear it around the house for a little bit tonight. Thought that was really funny. And overall, I thought it was quite good. Interestingly, it is similar to Cruel Intentions in that Heath Ledger enters a transaction where he's paid to try to date Julia Stiles and ends up falling for her. There's so many of these movies. Many movies where person A is paid or challenged to get with person B and then falls for them. And then there's the inevitable conflict where when the person finds out and then you think that they're going to break up, but guess what? Nope. They're forgiven.
I mean, yeah, that whole like plot device makes me really uncomfortable, and they should totally never talk to that person again. But yeah, still, I guess it's a popular.
I think it depends on the situation. Like I found it to be, I was more okay with it in this movie than in Cruel Intentions.
Oh yeah,
let's put it that way. This movie was fairly innocent, like, and it's not like he was. I mean, it seems obvious that he really did have feelings for her, so it seemed a little bit more innocent in this one.
Out of all the terrible versions of this movie that just treat the characters absolutely awfully, then this one is one of the best possible interpretations of this story.
Yeah, oddly, the fourth movie we'll be talking about this week also has the exact same plot device. It's
based on a real thing that happened.
How about that?
Because men are gross.
Yeah, they are. Very 90s, this movie. Lots of typical 90s stuff going on. They're all wearing the 90s garb. You got like the cut off shirts for the ladies showing their belly buttons, and the kind of like boot cut pants, and lots of ska music. This movie was loaded up with ska music.
It's all ska.
A lot of Save Ferris and Letters to Cleo, and they actually are in this movie.
Yeah, they're in it. They perform on the roof of the school for the credits.
Well, yeah, I wanted to ask about that. I have that written.
I want to talk about that school.
I have this.
It's a castle.
What is going on with this school? First of all,
it's a real high school.
This is in Seattle, right?
I believe.
I'm pretty sure it's Seattle.
It is. I think so.
And wow, what an incredible campus!
Yeah, I actually did read a little bit about this. I'm looking at now. It's in Tacoma, actually. But
close
details.
enough.
Yeah, it was meant to be a hotel, like a luxury hotel resembling a chateau. I'm just reading off the Wikipedia right now. But in the 1890s, but the economy crashed in 1893, so they couldn't continue building it, and then it just kind of sat there for a while, and then the Tacoma School District apparently needed a building for a high school, so they purchased the facility and did that. Apparently, it's just a normal high school, like a public high school. It just is in an incredible building.
Yeah, and the football field looks really cool too. It's a very unique looking football field.
Like slopes into the ground, and then it's overlooking the water. The
Yeah, and the bleachers are like cement bleachers. They're not your standard lame metal bleachers that so many high schools have.
I think all movies with a high school should be shot at this facility because it is so good. And then when kids start watching high school movies when they're in middle school, they'll be really disappointed when they get to high school and that their school does not look like a chateau.
I was always disappointed by high school because every TV show and movie I saw had lockers outside. Like everybody's always outside in the high school movies, and so many high school movies are shot in and around LA or warm climates. They're in places that have outside lockers, and you couldn't do that where I lived. Everything was inside.
You cannot do that where I'm from either. It's around this, I guess, it's the same part of the country. It's way too cold in the winter. That would make no sense.
My elementary school was actually a former firehouse. Excellent. But it wasn't. I think if I went there now, I might appreciate it. But back then, I was just like, this is a pain. There was no elevator or anything, and the classrooms, it was a pretty small building, so you would always have to go up and down flights of stairs to get to the second floor or third. I don't know how many floors it was. I don't remember, but it's a pain. And my high school was just normal, boring high school, except for the fact that they were doing major construction almost the entire time I was there. And most of my classes were in portable pods, which made it even worse.
My high school, it's in a town that's primarily known as a college town. There's like a giant university, and like the facilities in the university literally start right across the street from the high school. So you're always in the shadow of this giant institution that takes all of the town's attention and resources. And it's basically impossible to get anything, any attention drawn towards like the ongoings at the public schools, like the actual like school district for the residents of the town. So our roofs were always, the roof was always leaking from like rain, and we had to like put it on. There was a referendum on the ballot to get repairs for the roof, and it failed a couple of times before we could finally convince people how bad it was.
Oh God.
But we did. It got it fixed, and now I've heard that it is leaking again.
Of course. Because
I think what happened is it got eventually whittled down to such a point where the actual money and resources allocated to it were not what they initially wanted.
Yeah.
So they could not be as comprehensive as they wanted to be.
Yeah. When they unveiled the new renovated section of my school, they had to make the whole school bigger because there were so many students. And by the time it finished, I was a senior, and it was already too small. So they ended up having to extend the time between periods so kids could actually get to their next class, because it was so crowded that it took like double the time to get through the sea of children to your next class. Oh man, my school was a nightmare. And when they opened the cafeteria, there were so many kids in the cafeteria at once. What they ended up having to do was not only extend the lunchtime, but they created this like corral, and they would have one of the lunch workers, one of the lunch ladies, sort of man the corral like it was a nightclub. And there was like they installed like turnstiles, like a gate. And we would always joke about how we're just cattle that are being led into the feeding room.
I like how your high school basically needed the equivalent of like a emergency management task force just to handle lunch every day.
They had to allocate one of the cafeteria workers to watching and seeing when it was clear enough that they could let another group of people in. They would open the metal gates, and then kids would just flood in, and then they would have to close the gates. And It was so bad. It was comically bad.
That sounds lovely.
Yeah. Yep. So the ending scene, why is the band playing on the roof of that school? Like,
because it's a really cool shot, as I think the only reason.
It was a cool shot, but there's no audience. Like
everyone just they pull out. It's an aerial shot. They just pull out as the credits are rolling. All the students are just on the ground, just going about their business while a band just plays on the roof.
And they're so high up that even if you could hear them playing, you wouldn't be able to hear them really good enough you wouldn't be able to see them, and you wouldn't be able to hear them good enough to like rock out to Letters to Cleo.
I'm guessing that is not meant to be part of the movie. It's not canon.
I think you're right. I just didn't really.
Or maybe it is, and that's even better. Maybe
that's
sometimes
where they go to practice.
Maybe sometimes bands just appear on the roof and no one can hear them, but they see them up there. And that's just part of what it's like going to school in a giant chateau.
Yeah. Yeah, so 10 Things I Hate About You, pretty solid. I enjoyed going back to this and revisiting it. Now, my next thing is I'll have to revisit some of the, like, Can't Hardly Wait is another one that I would often get mixed up with this one. So I might have to go back to that one and see which one I like more. Hey dudes, did you pick up Gex 3 Deep Cover Gecko for PlayStation and need some help getting through those tricky sections? Well, listen close because this month's Cheater's Corner is for you. To get invincibility while the game is paused, hold L2 and press down, up, left, triangle, right, down. Now, get out there and help that little gecko save Agent Extra.
Our next feature began as the first original animated series on Nickelodeon in 1991 before being bought by Disney in 1996. Released on March 26th, this is Doug's first movie.
On March 26th, only in theaters, it's the biggest adventure of Doug's life. It's Doug's first movie. Legend has told of a monster in Lucky Duck Lake.
Something bad behind me, isn't there?
Can Doug face his biggest adventure ever?
He's not scary at all.
Can Doug save the dance from the evil guys out to destroy the monster of Lucky Duck Lake? And tell Patty Mayonnaise how he really feels?
Oh, man!
All your questions will be answered in Doug's first movie. Rated G. Starts Friday, March 26th.
Doug Funny and his friends find a monster named Herman Melville who lives in the woods outside their town. But no sooner do they find out that the monster is actually kind of nice, not like a real monster at all, they suddenly find themselves hunted by bad guys who want to capture the monster for their own evil purposes. In the midst of all of this, the school dance is coming up and Doug has to compete with a snobby 8th grader named Guy Grammer for the attentions of Patty Mayonnaise. Will Doug save the monster from the bad guys and still get to take Patty for the Valentine's Day dance? Now, I sort of forgot that we were trying to do high school movies, and I sort of forgot that this was middle school and not high school. I just figured that Doug would be in high school by this point.
8th grade is, well, yeah, it's 8th grade, but so we'll say second half of like the 12 years of education.
Yeah, there you go.
The second half of the 12 years.
A lot of it takes place in a school, so it's close enough, I guess.
Yeah.
Now, I was a pretty big Doug fan when I was younger. I still remember vividly. This is one of these like random child memories that I have when they announced Nicktoons and they were promoting them pretty heavily. And I was so excited that they were launching all these new cartoons. And I watched them as soon as they came out, and Doug was the first one, and it was a really great series. But the movie was pretty rough, I thought.
Yeah.
I did not enjoy this one bit. I thought, as I was watching it, I just kept asking myself, or having to remind myself, this is a movie that was in theaters. I remember when this was in theaters. I never saw it before, and I'm sort of glad I didn't, because now my love for the show Doug has been tarnished.
From what the little bit I read after I watched it, somewhat predictably, this was originally conceived as a direct-to-video movie, but for whatever reason, it ended up getting a theatrical release.
There's nothing about it that elevates it above just a longer episode of the show.
It's really short. It's like 75 minutes.
Thankfully.
I'm not saying it's bad.
I wouldn't be able to take an hour and a half of this.
An hour and a half of I guess the closest comparison I have, G-rated Shape of Water.
Yeah. I didn't think it was actually going to be a real monster, and it actually is like this. So it's like a mutated.
I love that monster.
It's a Herman Melville.
That monster's adorable.
It's a mutated lizard, because it turns out that this rich guy, I can't remember his name, but like the daughter's name is Bebe. Her dad is this like rich businessman, and he's polluting the lake, and the lake becomes toxic and mutates this lizard. And it's up to Doug. It's up to Doug and Skeeter to shut it down. All the while he's trying to make things right with Patty Mayonnaise for the big
great name.
I know, right? Well,
every name, like, there's so much care given to making all these names as fantastic as possible.
Well, that's the great thing about Doug, and I think that what happened with Doug, it's just a tragedy. When it was on Nickelodeon, it was incredible. What a great show. Then when Disney bought it, they redid the whole thing. They named it like Disney's Doug. I think it was called something else. I think it was called like the All New Doug or something. And they redid a lot of things, and they ended up taking away a lot of the charm that it once had. They changed the theme song. You heard a little bit of it in the trailer. Like, that's just the theme song of the new show. The original theme song of the show, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, was incredible.
Yeah, I'm not really familiar with Doug.
All of the music in the original Doug on Nickelodeon was really clever and fun and quirky, and they changed all of that for the Disney one for some reason. I'm not sure why they made that change. They changed Doug's voice, so that was a huge, because I never watched any of the Disney stuff, because when it moved over to Disney, I was older, and when I saw ads for it, I was just like, no, oh no, that's not going to work for me. So I never watched any of it. And with the movie, it was with the new voice of Doug. And so right off the bat, I'm like, this isn't my Doug. This is not my Doug.
Should have started a campaign or something.
Yeah, they changed a lot of stuff when they switched over to Disney. I'm sure that there's a list of all of the changes they made with characters and whatnot. And it's just, it sucks. I mean, they kept the same, creator. Like, he was still involved. I can't remember his name. It was Jim Jenkins. He was still involved, but I guess Disney just wanted to switch it up. It was a lot more, I mean, the original one's kid friendly, but it's just really vanilla. The Disney one. It's sad, and this movie just sort of marks the end of Doug. It's I don't know if they ever brought it back in any other capacity.
Love that monster. Love Herman Melville.
Yeah, monster's okay. I was just happy that Mr. Dink was in it. I'm a big fan of Mr. Dink. I just thought he was a fun character. And Pork Chop. Love Pork Chop, the dog.
Yeah, that's kind of the takeaway I had from it. And now knowing more about the context behind it, it makes a lot more sense. I would look at all these characters and I thought, these are really interestingly conceived and mounted characters that feel like they were created for much better purposes than whatever's going on in this movie. So it makes a lot of sense that it would come from a show that went through a very drastic shift at some point.
If I remember correctly, the original one actually was comprised of 2 segments. So there'd be like 2 10-minute long segments that would follow a character in an episode. And when they moved over to Disney, they made one 22-minute long story. So they did far less with the like side characters. Like in the original one, there'd be whole episodes or whole stories centered around like Mr. Dink and whatever kind of like crazy new technology he bought or whatever. And they didn't really do that. They didn't really expand the characters much in the Disney version.
Yeah, I think like two per episode is like a really smart way to approach something like this. I think it is the way that a lot of these kinds of shows probably work best because, like you said, if there are a lot of characters, then you can kind of move throughout them in a sort of more evenly distributed way, and to the point where they just kind of feel like a bunch of different sketches that can explore specific ideas. Where if you're really trying to go all in on one thing world when it wasn't really built for that, then it's not really going to carry over.
Especially because it's not Doug the character that really made the show. It was everybody in the town. It was such a cool, well-developed town that they lived in, and all of the characters made up the show. It wasn't just Doug. I mean, he was the main guy, but it was everybody else that sort of fleshed out the show. And to just make every episode about him and his latest, whatever kind of crap he's dealing with, it, I think, does a disservice to all of these other really well thought out and well developed characters. Like Roger, for instance, the bully. I read that in the Disney version, they made him wealthy. So he somehow, I guess, becomes rich. Whereas in the Nickelodeon one, he lived in a trailer park. So there was always this sort of dichotomy with him being the sort of poor kid who becomes a bully to deal with his own issues at home and stuff. Whereas in the Disney one, I guess they thought maybe that was a little bit too tough of a subject to deal with. So they just made him rich, and he's still a bully. And he had very little to do in this movie. I kind of expected, since he's essentially the antagonist of the show, I expected him to have a bigger presence in the movie, but he's not really even in it that much.
Yeah, it definitely feels, on the whole, that this was this is the culmination of a show that was taken in directions that it wasn't really built for. And the more you say that, the more I do feel like that was the problem here, is that it is growing further and further from its original style and structure. And so it only feels like you're going through the motions with characters and ideas that they can't sustain.
Yeah. I mean, all you have to do is watch the intro of the original one versus the intro of the Disney one, and you'll immediately be like, okay, one is clearly better than the other. The Disney version of the show, to my knowledge, isn't even available to like stream or anything. You can stream the Nickelodeon episodes still. I think they I don't know if they're still on Hulu. I know Verve picked up a lot of the Nickelodeon stuff, so it might be on there. But the Disney version is gone for the most part.
It doesn't sound like that's too much of a crushing
No.
loss.
No, that's the Disney or the Nickelodeon one's the one you should see, and you should not see the movie.
Yeah.
Because it will totally ruin your memories of Doug.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many good ideas, like Quail Man. Quail Man does make an appearance in this. The Beats. You see a poster for the Beats in the movie, but I read that in the Disney version they disbanded the band, the Beats, so they weren't. Those were also not present in the Disney version.
Yeah, I definitely noticed the attention given to the Beats and the poster, and I figured there had to be something else going on there.
Yeah, I don't know why they ended up getting rid of them in the Disney version, because they played a really major, like everybody loved the Beats. They were such a big part of the original series. Certainly ends on a more of a whimper than anything else, because Doug's first movie is not. I just can't recommend this. I did not enjoy myself watching it at all, and they only have the SD version available to rent, so it doesn't even look good.
I guess it's all I kind of want to do now is seek out the Nickelodeon episodes just to see where this started. But then I might get more retroactively disappointed with the movie.
You will, guaranteed.
Mm-hmm.
I would say at least that they have the intro on YouTube. At least just give the intro a watch. 30
right.
seconds, and it's this really catchy little tune, and it sort of gives you an idea of how the music was throughout the whole show. And it was just really, really great. I imagine I do want to revisit Nicktoons on this show and sort of go a little bit more in depth on Nicktoons as a whole. Mm-hmm. So we'll come back to that when it fits within the theme of the show.
The wait is over. Now 2 has arrived. 18 chart-topping hits, all in one mind-blowing collection.
Me, baby, one more time.
I know you get nothing but the biggest hits. This is Now 2. Get into the groove. Get into Now 2. Call now to get yours on CD or cassette. The hottest tracks of the year, all in one essential album. Rock on with 18 power-packed hits. The superstar hit collection you've been waiting for is here. Now, that's what I call music. Volume 2 on CD or cassette. Call now. To order, call the number on your screen or send check or money order for $15.98 for cassette or $17.98 for CD. Plus shipping and handling to the address below. Rush delivery available. Call now.
In addition to the treasure trove of high school movies, the decade brought with it numerous high school themed TV shows as well. Freaks and Geeks, My So-Called Life, Beverly Hills 90210, and my personal favorite, Parker Lewis Can't Lose, just to name a few.
This month, we're going to be taking a look at a more obscure series, however, which aired on Nickelodeon in the evenings from 1991 to 1993. This is 15.
Life happens every day, and so does 15. Confrontation, infatuation, confusion. 15. Nickelodeon's continuing high school saga is on every weekday afternoon. Your chance to watch the story unfold day by day. No more waiting to find out who's going with who, which troublemaker is spreading the rumors, where the next clash will be, because it's only tomorrow away. So get hooked on 15 every weekday at 5:30, 4:30 Central on Nick.
That is... I'm sorry. That commercial is ridiculous.
And it was done in earnest, too. Like, that, it was 100% serious. That was not a joke, folks.
They're trying to sell this like it's a Paul Verhoeven movie.
It was 100% serious, too. That was not a joke.
I'm upset now. That was upsetting.
Oh my God. 15 was a Canadian-American TV series that was first developed for the Disney Channel, but after the 13-episode pilot was not picked up, Nickelodeon bought the rights and produced a total of 65 episodes over 4 seasons. Man, so just some backstory on 15. I asked a lot of people about this. Nobody remembers this show. Nobody can recall watching 15. And I hated it. I thought it was the worst show ever. Because I was fairly young when this came out. Even if I was older, even if I was 15 years old when this show came out, I would probably not be able to stand it. This was Nickelodeon's, I think, first and only drama series. And I think that it came on right before or right after Welcome Freshman, which was it was a comedy series that took place in a high school. And by the way, Welcome Freshman has an absolutely incredible intro. I went back and watched it when I was reminiscing about 15, and man, that really holds up. If you remember the intro to Kids in the Hall, it's sort of like a Kids in the Hall-esque intro, but man, it's so good. So your homework is to watch the intro for Doug and watch the intro for Welcome Freshman.
All right.
I think you'll enjoy both of those. So we took a look at 15. The entire first season is available on Amazon Prime. So you can watch 15, and also it's on YouTube as well. Ken, what did you think of 15?
This meant nothing to me.
Aw.
It was just nothing. I didn't hate it. I didn't like it. It was just there. What a tragedy to have to watch a Canadian teen soap opera that is not the one that we're all thinking of.
I thought it was hilarious.
It is, but at the same time, I didn't walk away with anything after. It wasn't like so bizarre that I just left and I'm like, I have to tell people. It just sort of sat there in front of me.
It is very much a soap opera. It was shot on videotape, I believe, and it looks really cheap. I mean, unbelievably cheap. And the scripts are horrible, and the acting is unbelievably atrocious. Like, I mean, these are kids who clearly this is their first role and they have no idea.
And it might be the first time they're seeing their lines.
Yeah, they have no idea what's going on in this show at all. They don't know how to emote properly, so a lot of times you'll have them delivering lines that they clearly don't understand, and they'll just be randomly raising their voices and then lowering their voices. So the inflection is like always all over the place, and you're like, wait a minute, are they mad or are they excited? Like,
it is genuinely hard to tell what's happening because all you have are the literal words that they're saying, and nothing about the delivery is helping you understand these characters at all.
It's like watching, I imagine. So, you know, like old Italian films, they used to just like mouth the English dialogue, and then they would have an English speaking actor just dub over the actor's lines. And I'm imagining that that's sort of how this was, where these kids were able to memorize the words, but they didn't understand them at all or the context. So they were just literally speaking words that they memorized.
Mm-hmm.
It's something else. It's something else.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It is very much a soap opera designed for teens, and it deals with a lot of teen issues like divorce and dating and school and substance abuse, which is the really kind of weird one that they throw in there. Which,
why not?
It's so funny. So the one character who I believe is supposed to be one of the main characters of the show, I think his name's Matt.
It's hard to tell exactly who's the main character here.
I can't remember the kid's name.
They have names?
They do have names. If you remember that amazing intro they show all their names.
I just watched the intro for the intro. I completely forgot it was trying to transmit information.
Yes, that's pretty incredible. So like the main dude he gradually becomes an alcoholic, and some of the dialogue that comes from that is truly incredible. Like, you have Laura Harris in this delivering some of the most incredible lines about her accusing her 15-year-old boyfriend, of being an alcoholic because he drinks on Friday and Saturday nights. Not that I'm saying a 15-year-old should drink on Friday and Saturday nights, but
I'm just thinking about the way that the whole thread is developed, and it does not make any sense at all.
It's pretty bad. And you also have Laura Harris. She would go on to be in a lot of things. She's a pretty established actress. You would probably recognize her from a lot of the roles that she was in. And then you also have Ryan Reynolds. This is how Ryan Reynolds got his start. And he was on IMDb. It says he was only in 13 episodes. He was in many, many more than that. He was in almost the whole series.
I mean, that's usually not a great indicator, the IMDb, of how many episodes of something someone's been involved in, because I guess they have to manually add it to every episode. And I don't think anyone cares enough about this show to go and manually check how many episodes people were in.
I'm pretty sure he was in it all the way up until the end. There were some characters, a lot of characters just dropped off. So I was only able to see I couldn't find the second or third or fourth seasons anywhere. Like, I found a couple clips on YouTube, but I was able to track down the first episode of the second season because I just wanted to see like what the difference was, because I remembered 15 being a lot different than what we saw in the first season. And I think that they gradually changed things up a lot as the show went on, because the first 13 episodes were like the pilot episodes that were being shopped at Disney. And then the second season was when Nickelodeon took over. So it is a lot different. It looks like the characters look like they're 5 years older in the second season. And they look so wildly different, which brings me to a lot of the nagging questions I have about this show and the world that it takes place in, because I'm fairly certain that this is not our own world, our own reality. Because first of all, this is a world populated by children. There is not a single adult anywhere in this movie. I mean, in this show. You have so the scenes there's only a few, because it's a very cheap show. You only have a few places that have
it feels like 95% of this takes place in the one set that's like almost like the lobby of the school, like near the staircase.
Yeah, so you have the lobby, you have this like 50s style diner. It's like old-timey diner that they hang out in, and then there's like a separate section of that diner that has a pinball machine. Like, all these kids just love playing on that same pinball machine over and over again. And then there's like a couple other places. Later on, they add Dylan's garage as one of the sets, but for the most part, it's in like certain areas of the school. Sometimes it'll take place in like, does it take place in the library? Are there any? No, I don't think so. I'm trying to remember if there's any other places. There's like more of like a lounge area in the school that sometimes is there. It's very limited. Either way, no adults anywhere. Even when they're at the diner, it's a child who's serving them. They just guzzle gallons of iceless soda in this show. Just nonstop iceless soda. In one episode, I was shocked because they were served milk, and I was expecting the milk to have ice in it, but it didn't.
This maybe it's set in like the most positive interpretation of the Lord of the Flies world, where the children build a running civilization.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Because the kid that works in this diner looks like he's 12 years old. He's got like the hat. He's like a soda jerk, right? He's got the hat on and everything.
Mhm.
Everything in the diner looks like it's this 50s style place. And I don't understand how time works in this world either. Because one second they're in school, the next they're in the old timey diner, and then in the next second they're back in school. So I don't know if they like maybe go to the diner for lunch.
Maybe it was like maybe they get like a nice like long like off campus lunch. Then again, there's no adults, so there's no rules.
Right. So they can just do whatever they want.
Yeah.
They mention adults. Like they complain a lot about adults. Of course, they're kids, but you never see them. Like
I don't believe they exist. I think they just say that to answer your, so people don't ask questions about the world of this TV show.
The main kid, Matt, he has a real problem with the coach. Coach is just riding him all day, every day.
That coach doesn't exist.
He's averaging 19 points a game, and coach is still riding him.
Clearly, the coach does not exist.
It's all in their minds. That's what it is. Because there are no adults in this world, they're just manifesting. These are all delusions of children who have long ago lost their minds.
It's like, I don't know if you've ever watched like the miniseries that the Onion production wing does, but how it just starts off one way and then it just goes completely insane and it becomes goes from like satire to just straight up surrealism.
Yeah.
That's kind of the thread we're following here. It starts out as a generic little teen soap opera, and then you realize it's set in an elaborate alternate universe where no adults exist, and the children are having delusions of adults to make their world feel like it has some semblance of order and normality.
It's like one of those, I don't know if you've seen any of those Adult Swim like one-off unedited footage of a bear or
stuff like that.
It's like one of those.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it is.
Because whatever this succeeds on, it does not succeed as a teen soap opera.
So they're guzzling iceless soda all day, every day. They're wearing the same clothes. Like days go by and they're just wearing the same clothes. So between episode 1 and episode 2, they're wearing the same clothes. And at first I thought, oh, well, it's just the one girl. What's her name?
Oh,
hold on. Courtney? No. Brooke, maybe.
I'm having so much trouble with this.
No, not Brooke. Brooke's the bad girl. She's the one who's always scheming. It is Courtney. So Courtney, she's wearing the same clothes from episode 1 to episode 2. And I'm thinking, oh, well, maybe she's just, she's on a 1-week rotation. She's just we're like a week later and she's wearing the same clothes. But then it cuts over to, I think, Jake, the kid that she's talking to. He's wearing the same clothes too. And I'm like, wait a minute, what is going on here? They're all wearing the same clothes.
They're not old enough to learn how to do their laundry yet, and there's no adults to do it for them.
They just wear the same outfits over and over again. I did notice that throughout the whole first season, each of the kids only wear about 2 or 3 different outfits. They do change them sometimes, but they quite frequently rock out the same outfits.
Maybe it's set on a planet with 87-hour days.
Maybe. Could be. The other odd thing is that Matt, who's like the main character, he's the drinker. He's the one who's averaging 19 points a game and coach is still riding him. And he's such a douche to everyone around him. And we're supposed to think he's like the cool guy. We want to see him succeed. We want him to him and his relationship with Ashley. We want it to work out. But it's like, no, he's a bully. There was a whole section of the show where he was making fun of the foreign exchange student, Olaf. And there'll be frequently like just one-off segments of the show where he's just making fun of somebody. Like he was making fun of Ryan Reynolds' shirt in one scene because Ryan Reynolds was wearing a black shirt and he's like laughing at him because he's wearing a black shirt. And it's like, sorry, no, we're not going to like this guy. he's a loser. It's just a really strange show.
It doesn't come close to operating on any of the fronts that it wants to operate on, but it does introduce a whole new alternate reality that's very fun to explore. But that's not what it was going for. Like, I know we didn't say it by name, but the new Degrassi on Netflix, like the one that they did there, I'll blow through like a season of that in 2 days. It's sufficiently, like, it draws you in. Like, it works on the merits that it's supposed to. So yeah, I did make that joke about it not being the Canadian teen soap that you're thinking of, but it's kind of a shame that it isn't now.
It's definitely not Degrassi. I've never seen Degrassi, but due to the popularity of that show, I know that 15 is not Degrassi. I've seen enough like clips and things to know that it's definitely not on the same level. But does Degrassi have these awesome transitional tunes?
No.
What?
It
Like
does
that.
not. I like that the dialogue is so inane and the delivery is so off. They had to add those stings so you knew what you were supposed to be feeling at the end of every scene.
Yeah, they put those in almost every transition. So there's a lot of little segments. I mean, the whole show is essentially just, oh, these two characters are talking, and then we play this.
What?
And then we have two other characters talking. I mean, a large portion of the show is Brooke and Kelly meddling with everyone else and setting up these elaborate plans with seemingly no motive to do this other than to be awful people. And they just try to execute these plans of breaking people up, basically. And that's a pretty big section of the show. There's also almost every single episode, there's a locker room scene where two characters are talking in a locker room. And at the beginning of every single one of these scenes, in every episode that it's in, they show one of the kids tucking in their shirt because that is supposed to represent them finishing up a stringent gym class. And they're finishing up, putting on their clothes after getting out of their gym attire, and they're just tucking in that shirt, just giving a little tuck.
Really, the best way the best way to demonstrate that that like the world somehow exists as they infer it does, like the off-screen events that they're talking about do happen, but it doesn't work. I still don't believe it.
I still
think it's an alternate universe.
They never show them in their gym clothes either. So I don't think there are gym clothes. I think that they just go in the locker room and untuck their shirts and then tuck them in as they're having a conversation about talking to Matt about his alcoholism. He has a flask. He ends up getting a flask, and Ashley finds the flask in his knapsack, as she calls it. She finds a flask in his knapsack. And then there's a scene where he tells Ashley that his parents found a bottle of liquor in his drawer, and they send him to rehab, I guess, or they want to send him to rehab. Now, in the first episode of the second season, they never even mention the rehab or the alcoholism or any of that. So I don't know if they come back to that later on, but he's in it. Matt's in it, but he, I guess. And the other funny thing is, like, new characters will just show up and we've never seen them before, but they're like best friends with the other characters who we have seen before. And it's like, okay, well, where did Kelly go? And why did you replace the only African-American character with just another generic white suburban teen? But that's what they did.
Words fail to try and articulate exactly what might be going on in the universe of the show.
I would say it is worth watching maybe the first episode, if for no other reason, just to see Ryan Reynolds as a little like snot-nosed kid who he just wants a friend. He's just looking for any friend he can get. He becomes friends with Dylan, but Dylan's sort of a bad boy. And then he becomes friends with Olaf, but other people think Olaf is weird. So then he sort of pulls back. He just wants a friend. His parents are getting divorced. Ugh, poor Billy.
Watch it for no other reason than the music. Our last movie this month is a sequel to a classic horror story. Picking up 2 decades after the events of Carrie, it follows another outsider high school student who discovers that she also wields telekinetic powers. Released on March 12th, this is The Rage, Carrie 2.
Sometimes I really wish I could just be one of the shiny, happy people.
What if you had the power to move objects with your mind? And what if everyone around you, Rachel, gave you a reason?
Come on, this girl's just a skank.
To use it.
Dude, it's her! It's her doing it!
The Rage, Carrie 2, rated R.
I would love to know how many movies used Rob Zombie's Dracula in it during that time, because I feel like that song was used so much back then. Just, it was everywhere. Rob Zombie was everywhere.
It's like sometimes how you wonder if, a person is very rich and famous, but then you wonder, did a disproportionate amount of their money come from one thing you wouldn't suspect? Maybe Rob Zombie's fortune comes from the use of that song in
Could
trailers.
be.
Let's thinking about the other day. Tom Hanks, very rich man, but he also produced My Big Fat Greek Wedding, which made $370-something million. So maybe a disproportionate amount of his fortune is not from all the movies that that he's him from. Maybe it's just from producing My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Yeah.
Anyway,
could be. After the suicide of her only friend, Rachel has never felt more on the outside. The one person who reached out to her, Jesse, also happens to be a part of the popular crowd that lives to torment outsiders like her. But Rachel has something else that separates her from the rest, a secret, amazing ability to move things with her mind. Sue Snell, the only survivor of Carrie White's rampage 22 years ago, may hold a key to helping Rachel come to terms with her awesome but unwanted power. But as Rachel slowly learns to trust, a terrible trap is being laid for her, and making her angry could prove to be fatal. Ken, I know you are just dying to talk about this movie, so we'll start it with you.
I think I recall this movie may have been one of the main impetuses behind us starting this podcast in the first place.
It was. It got us talking about.
Yeah, I guest co-hosted the regular Film Pulse podcast. I mentioned this was one of the movies I'd seen, and then afterwards we started talking about this idea you had to do a podcast about 90s pop culture. So, yeah, there's a lot to talk about here because I think this movie has been somewhat unfairly forgotten in what it represents in the greater pantheon of what does Carrie as a fictional property represent. It's a weird thing. This movie was one of those movies that was not supposed to be part a direct sequel to Carrie. It started out as a completely unrelated script. I don't understand how that's possible considering what the movie's about. But apparently that was. And I think it might be the only case where it works better because of it.
Well, I'm trying to think of what it would be if it wasn't, because I would have to almost read the script of what it was like before they added the
I need to read the first draft of this
because it follows the same structure as the original Carrie. It's it's basically a reboot. It's the same movie as the original Carrie, just brought into the 90s, and of course they shoehorn in this a connection between the original that I want to touch on that a little bit later.
Yeah. But before I defend this movie and why I think it actually is more important than even I realized the first time I saw it, I remember when I first mentioned it, you said you saw it in the theater,
I did. Yeah.
So you didn't see, I think, any of the other movies we talked about this month in the theater. So what was the rationale behind you seeing The Rage Carrie 2 during its very brief theatrical run?
That's easy.
Like 3 weeks.
That's easy. I was on a date. I took a date to see The Rage Carrie 2. So it was like a double date scenario. I don't know if I necessarily chose it, but I was into horror movies back then, so that was certainly one of the things that would have got me into the theater. But I saw a lot of bad movies during that time. I remember I saw Coyote Ugly twice in the theater during that time. I saw a lot. This is also, I think it was close to when I think I was working at a movie theater during that time. So I might have got in for free. But regardless, that's why I saw it in the theater.
And
now I will say,
like it.
I hated it at the time. Rewatching it now, this is the first rewatch of this that I've had since seeing it in 1999. I have a much greater appreciation for it now. I still don't think it's a good movie. I'm gonna highlight.
I think it's about only 3 small mistakes away from being a masterpiece. But go on.
I'm gonna highlight some issues I had with it, but as far as revisiting it now and being able to reminisce and sort of just let the nostalgia of that movie wash over me, I have a much greater appreciation for it. But it's the one thing, maybe this is a problem I had back then, but would now find it to be very intriguing, is the fact that it's a very slow burn horror movie.
Oh, yeah.
This is a straight up high school movie through and through, like a high school comedy or teen drama, all the way to the very last scene.
Yes.
Like that's the only thing that differentiates it from just a standard teen drama. You have is Jason London, right? I always get Jason and Jeremy mixed up, and for many years I didn't realize that it was 2 people. Like I thought it was just the same dude. And then at some point I was like, wait a minute, is his name Jason or Jeremy? And then I remember looking it up and being like, oh, it's twins. And they're both actors. That's incredible. You have him playing the sexy quarterback guy, and he's actually sort of the same character that he plays in Dazed and Confused. And he's on the football team. They have this bet going, or like it's a game. It's a game where they try to hook up with as many girls as they can, and they get points based on that. And that's what sparks Carrie's only friend into committing suicide, because she sleeps with the kid from Home Improvement, and once she finds out that she was just used, she jumps off of the roof of the high school. Mina Suvari actually plays the friend. And the first thing I noticed, most 90s school intro scene ever. Like,
oh yeah,
1,000%. The scene when they first go to school and there's so many kids outside, they're hacky sacking, there's ska music playing. We got the baggy jeans, there's skateboarding. It's so incredible, and it is like so iconically 90s. You got middle parts everywhere and bowl cuts, and it's great. Flannel shirts out the wazoo.
I like that scene a lot.
I truly love that scene. So unfortunately, her friend commits suicide, and everybody sees it because for some reason they're all still outside. Like the class was just, everything was outside in these schools, and they just resume class. They all just go back to class.
So weird.
Like they're not like, I mean, I'm pretty sure if a kid
jumps off the roof while everyone sees
everyone's there to witness it.
The school would be closed for a little while.
They're sending people home. All they did was everybody back to class. Moment of silence. At 1 p.m. Moment of silence.
I love that they got Amy Irving to come back and do this movie. I also love that one of my problems with that movie is like transitional plot details like that, just like moving it from piece to piece. And there are some just the announcement she has to read out. We will be observing a moment of silence at 1 p.m. and then has to go on and list all of the people that might miss her.
Yeah.
There's dialogue stuff in this movie that is just bad. However, there is something very interesting going on here, and that has nothing to do with the script. It has everything to do with Katché, the director's interpretation of the script, is my guess. Here's what it is. I realize, after watching this movie and looking at all the adaptations of Carrie, there has been an adaptation of Carrie every decade since the novel was published. There was the De Palma movie in the 70s. There was even the musical in the 80s, which I will count for the purpose of this argument. The Rage Carrie 2 in the 90s. And before I go on, the 2002 TV miniseries, I haven't seen it. I've only seen the end. It's great. It looks hilariously bad. I don't know anything about this 2002 version, but it was shot on 2002 era digital video, so everything looks like a really low budget reality show.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, the 2000s had the 2002 TV version. The 2010s have had the Kimberly Pierce remake with Chloe Grace Moretz.
Mm-hmm.
So this is something interesting that I feel like you could use it to chart what exactly is going on thematically with how Carrie's being interpreted. Because what I think is interesting is that the Stephen King novel and the De Palma movie are very individualistic. It's about this one specific person who's being outcast and the power and autonomy that she yields that they will not let her, that makes her different but also a powerful individual. And it's sort of seen as it only builds up until it intrinsically becomes destructive. What's interesting here is that it is more of a collective thing. It's more of a systemic social thing. There are these there's this clearly delineated problem. It's these sort of wealthy, privileged jocks that can do whatever they want, and even when the point comes that they should face some kind of consequences, they come from wealthy enough families that nothing will happen. But what they're doing is affecting essentially all of the girls at this school to an extent. And so what's interesting here is that it represents a point where it's not about an isolated kind of sort of fantastical allegory. It's about viewing a real world social dynamics through it instead of the other way around. And I think that's really interesting that you pointed out independently, before I've gone on this kind of sidetrack, that you're right. It does, for the most part, feel like a traditional teen drama until the very end, because it's building up and it's sort of slow burning this world that is very, very recognizable and unfortunately still feels very relevant in the politics of it and the way that people are being marginalized by a privileged class that's essentially getting away with whatever they want. I don't think, I was reading a lot of interesting retrospectives about this movie that have been written recently, and I think one of them in one of the horror blogs was written around the time of the Brett Kavanaugh Supreme Court hearings and the allegations against him when he was in high school, and it feels just so startlingly clear in what the movie is trying to parallel between actual real world events and dynamics and privilege between these rich white guys and everyone else that they're essentially just using. And I think it's really interesting how Katché is able to take what's kind of a sloppily written script and actually make it something that feels responsive to a real world. That's my reading of this movie. That's the second reason I like this movie is someone gets killed by flying CDs.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you, and watching it now, it does seem almost more relevant now than ever before, just because we've had so many things come out where this type of stuff does happen. I mean, in a lot of cases, much worse things have happened. I mean, at least in this movie, it was like these were all consensual encounters. At least that's what it seems like in the context of the movie. So in a lot of ways, reality is much worse than what's happening in the Rage, Carrie 2. Watching it now, I have a greater fondness for all of the stuff that happens up until the end part. And the end part is pretty fun too. I mean, you do see people get decapitated from CDs and
flying CDs. I also, if we can go back to just like the more, I guess, pure entertainment about this movie, is the way that it's like the production design is aged. That is the most like 90s-ist looking mansion.
Oh, I know. Oh my God. I don't understand. Like, so they randomly switch to black and white throughout this movie. It was something I never quite understood, because at first it's like, oh, well, maybe that's when she's using her powers, but it doesn't follow its own rules. I mean,
I guess it's just purely stylistic.
Yeah, it's just random cut to black and white. And then there's like one scene where she's like, I think she's like in the kitchen of her house, and it turns to black and white, and we see a close up of her face as she's trying to get her powers under control. And it dawned on me like, oh man, I bet if this whole movie was in black and white, it would probably look incredible. But it's not. It's most of it is your typical 90s look to it.
Yeah. We also have to talk about something that weirdly just stuck in my mind from the first time I saw it, is like the nu metal song over the credits.
Oh yeah.
Which I don't know why I still think about that, but like for weeks after I first saw this movie, just random lines from that chorus, lyrics from that chorus would just appear in my head for no reason, just because it is so like generically nu metal, it almost hurts.
Oh yeah, and it has that amazing font choice. And the opening titles as well. The classic 90s style font where it's like got this kind of goth, like jagged look to it. I'm reminded of like Blair Witch 2 Book of Shadows, that style. So in one scene when she first meets Jesse, well, she doesn't, and she always knows Jesse, but the first time they really connect, her dog gets hit by a car, and she has this really great basset hound. Is he a basset hound? No.
Yeah,
he is. Yeah. And that scene, no dog would survive that.
Yeah.
The dog gets run over full on by both sets of tires.
Yeah.
And it just
Sebastian Valmont was killed in a far less terrible accident.
Yeah, he was. He just went up over the hood and hit the windshield. This dog just got destroyed by a truck. And it just so happens that Jamie is right there, and he takes the dog to the vet, and they're like, oh, he has like a broken rib and a sprained ankle, and he's going to be fine. And that sort of sparks their relationship. And I don't know if it was ever clearly established that Jamie was pursuing her for the game. I don't think he ever was.
Yeah.
I mean, like all the other players were egging him on for the game, but I don't think he was ever really taking part of that. I mean, he was with really. the quote unquote girlfriend that he had, but he never seemed to really like it. There's a lot of strange things that happen in this movie, though, like especially at the school. Like there's a scene where their coach randomly makes the one dude pull his pants down in the middle of class, and he like examines his butt, which seems really, really inappropriate.
Yes.
I'm not sure that
Yeah.
would ever be allowed in a school.
A lot of what happens in this movie would not be allowed in a school.
There's smoking apparently is allowed on school property in this world, in the Rage Carrie 2 school, because you frequently see kids just casually smoking outside. I know that at least in my school would get you expelled instantly.
Yeah.
And then they go, okay, so the guidance counselor, in the synopsis, it says about how the guidance counselor is trying to help her with her powers. That doesn't really happen. She basically finds out that she has the powers, but by the time she tries to do anything, it's too late. So they discover that somehow the male is the carrier of the telekinesis gene. And I'm not sure, is that ever, it's been many years since I've seen the original Carrie. I don't think that's ever established. And I'm like, what? How's that? How does she know that? How do they know that it's like, oh, if your dad has it, you have it, or whatever?
Maybe they're really doing a lot of heavy lifting of what would have been determined in like the 20 years between these two events, because a whole big thing about the Stephen King Carrie is that it's essentially large parts of it are from the investigation into it, investigation into what happened at the prom, like congressional hearings. So maybe we determined some kind of information through those 20 years of completely baffled research that telekinesis exists. And even in that case, then the script doesn't really work in the other direction, because then it's like it still surprises everybody.
Yeah. And they determine, so the guidance counselor figures out that Carrie's dad is also Rachel's dad. And I was thinking about this, and I'm like, he must be so old.
Yes.
Like, maybe too old. I mean, maybe not too old. I mean, it's possible. It's probably possible, technically. But if Carrie was a senior in 1976,
then
that would make Carrie was born in 1958, we'll say.
Yes.
And assuming Rachel is a senior in 1999, then she would be born in 1981.
Totally possible, actually.
23-year age gap between the siblings.
Yeah, it's
not
possible. Like,
it is possible, but it's
it
seems pretty unlikely that would be.
I mean, when rich men marry and keep remarrying, and there was that great SNL sketch, Meet Your Second Wife. When men remarry, their second wife is always a lot younger than their first wife, and yet they're still usually able to have more children. Yeah, no, that's absolutely possible. Out of all the things that don't make sense about the rooting of this movie, that's not the one that I'm concerned about. I think there's a 30-year age difference between Donald Trump's oldest child and his youngest child.
Yeah, I think you're right, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, but that does bring me back to my main argument here, is that the script of this movie is a mess. But there's something really interesting about what Kat Shea is doing, because she's taking the script that does not make a whole lot of sense, that is filled with holes. Like, for example, why is the wreckage from the high school still there?
I don't know. They just left it.
Yeah, but she's able to almost make you overlook that, because she really is digging into greater points here, greater parallels and points about social privilege and this complacency we have with these men who are basically told from very early age that they're just entitled to whatever they want, and manipulate whoever they want. She is very, very clearly trying to draw those parallels, and I think she really succeeds. She makes a very, very interesting movie here. She's a very interesting filmmaker, and yet, because of how they'll give, I think we covered this just last month, when we covered the Cache's like movie Poison Ivy, they will give male directors a billion chances to make movies that don't do great. This movie didn't do great. It like just broke even on the budget, which means it lost money with the way these things go. And yet it's been 20 years and her next theatrical movie just came out this past weekend as we're recording.
Yeah, it did. And I was going to mention that, and it had zero marketing.
Yeah.
I didn't even know this existed until we covered it on last month's show. And now that it's out, does anybody even know that a Nancy Drew and the Hidden Staircase came out in theaters?
It opened limited. They opened a Nancy Drew movie, like based on a known property, produced by like Ellen DeGeneres, and they opened it limited.
I mean, there was like, there's nothing. I didn't see a single ad for this anywhere. I got 0 emails about this. There's like nothing behind this movie. It's very strange.
Like there's so much evidence here of just how interesting a filmmaker she is. And like to the point where I almost wonder, like, obviously like the Brian De Palma version still feels like the definitive like adaptation of Carrie, but I think this movie almost doesn't, like, the story does not make as much sense if it's coming from like a male perspective the entire time. So I almost want to rewatch the Kimberly Pierce remake and see if there's anything going on there, or they just like the studio just like was the one who made it.
I think that's probably the case with that one, but I think that I think you make a good point, but I think that often the message gets undermined by the poorly developed script. I mean, there's so many things that happen in this that have to specifically have, like, so for instance, like they're getting ready to go to the party. You know, the big scene is about to happen, and Jamie is talking to some scouts. So they take Rachel to the party, and he has to go afterwards. But it turns out that the rival team spray painted his car and slashed the tires. So he gets in the car with his ex-girlfriend, and she needs to go back to her house first to change. But as she's driving away, she's holding the spray paint can and drops it on the ground. And it's like, come on, you couldn't come up with any better way to show that she was the one behind that than she's still holding this. So we're to believe she spray painted the car. She slashed the tires. She's holding the spray paint can in her hand. She gets in her own car. She turns on the car. She drives up. She doesn't put it down. She doesn't put it down in the seat. She doesn't put it in the trunk, back seat, nothing. Holding it in her hand as she's getting in her car and pulling out into the parking lot. It's baffling, some of the stuff that happens in this movie. And then, of course, when the S hits the F at the end, that's when things get really out of control. And unlike some of the ridiculous moments before, these are fun, ridiculous. They're not like eye rolling, like, come on. These are just like, they're not necessarily good, but it's so over the top that you're just like, yeah, of course this house has 3 spear guns in it that each of the 3 main bad guys.
Rich people have insane hobbies. I don't doubt that a mansion would have 3 spear guns in it.
They have collections of spear guns. And then, of course, you have actually, first, one of the interesting things that happens with Rachel in this is that she has a tattoo, this like heart tattoo with vines that she shared with her friend, the one who killed herself. And when her powers really go into effect and she loses control, like for some reason the tattoo like the heart starts beating and the vines grow all over all over her body. Now, they looked good, I will say that. Like, the effect looked cool. It still looks good, but it's like, what? How does that make any sense at all? What she can move stuff with her mind, not like create new tattoos from her old one. Makes no sense. 0 sense.
Yeah,
and
but
then
it doesn't bother me.
So then she starts, of course, dispatching people. She's shattering glass, and the glass is flying into people, and there's fire everywhere. And
there's such a good shot when she like shatters the windows in, and it's just her standing there as the glass is just blowing past her.
Yeah.
That's such a good shot.
It is. That is actually a really good shot. And then I love there's one scene when this just random girl is on fire, and all you can hear her say very clearly is, "Somebody put me out." And
the choice that line is a choice.
It's just so funny.
That I don't know whose decision that was. That's like the epitome of some studio executive sitting around going, but what do we do? Are we sure that we'll be able to tell what's going on there? We need to loop a line in.
Somebody put me out.
It like with all of the last minute like studio rush of like a movie released on March 12th, it felt like that line was looped on March 11th.
Yeah. So everybody gets killed, and then you have the last 3 people remaining, the three bad guys, the girl, and then the guy from Home Improvement, and then like the main guy who looks a lot like the dude from Entourage, just as douchey too. Mm-hmm. And the way that the guy from Home Improvement gets it is probably one of the most iconic scenes in the movie, when he gets the spear to the groin that goes completely through him into the pool.
That is such an important moment.
And you have the shot of the testicles attached to the spear. What I would assume are his testicles. It's a bloody mess. I
value that so much.
The result of that was Rachel shattering the glasses of the girl, and the glass going into her eyes, which she screams for like 5 seconds and then immediately dies. Now, yes. I'm sorry, but I just don't think that if your glass is shattered in your face, I mean, you'd be blinded, you'd be in a lot of pain, but you wouldn't be dead.
You'd be at least a little bit upset about it.
You wouldn't be dead though.
Like, I don't know. Maybe it went like really fast and like just cut a bunch of stuff up.
I mean, it is possible that she, I don't know, because you can see her eyes. Like, I was thinking maybe she made the glass shards, like there was such a forceful push that they went through the eyes and like into the brain and just ripped up her brain. But the way that, because you see her afterwards, and I don't know, you can still see her eyes. Anyway, she dies.
It's a minor detail, honestly.
And then the other guy falls into the pool, and Carrie I keep wanting to call her Carrie. Rachel makes the pool cover close, and he drowns, which seems anticlimactic. Like, you're like, oh man, I wanted to see the main baddie get it in a better way. But then I was thinking about it as I was watching it, and I'm like, is there a worse way to go than slowly drowning in a pool of blood and testicles? Like, that's a really bad way to go. I mean, drowning has to be one of the worst deaths. So, although it might not be as visually appealing as, you know, the spear groin, it's pretty brutal.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, I'm okay with him being drowned in that.
Yeah.
And then Jamie comes in and tries to save the day. Jesse. I keep calling him Jamie. Jesse comes in and tries to save the day, and Carrie gets killed because the house is burning. Rachel, damn it. What is happening? All these names I'm trying to keep track of this episode.
Like I said, the reason that this movie is, I think, legitimately worth watching is not because of the script. So,
but the thing is,
characters are not interesting.
I understand that, but the thing is, there's so much going on with the script. It's hard to overlook the problems.
I did. because I got what it was supposed to be going on here. I felt like I understood that, and when I say like 3 things were keeping this movie from being a masterpiece, what I mean is at least 3 new drafts of this.
Yeah. Again,
like,
going back to what I said at the very beginning, I do have a new appreciation for this. I don't despise it like I did when I originally saw it in the theater. I think that there is, with a lot of movies that you are separated from for decades, you end up not liking them as much as you did when you first saw them. But this actually had the opposite effect for me. And I think that's probably just because it aged in such a way that it's now it's campy, but it contains an important social message that is more relevant now.
Yeah, like absolutely. I think a movie very much worth watching, just as an argument for what a good and thoughtful and relevant and solidly based interpretation and direction of a movie can be, and what's actually going on, what Kat Shea is doing and what she is trying to communicate, which is very, very interesting to watch now. I guess this is a testament to how young I am, but everyone always talks about, like, critics always talk about, like, a movie that was not well received at the time that they wish they could have been a critic then and written like a piece and like a review in defense of it. Now I'm just thinking, like, if I were reviewing in March of 1999, I like to imagine I would have been among like the very small number of initial reviews for this movie were like, wait a second, there's something here.
I don't know, though.
I don't know.
It's hard to say that.
Yeah.
Having not,
of course. Yeah,
been in that space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like when people say, when like critics like, of a movie like Psycho was not very well reviewed when it came out, and every critic likes to think they would have been one of the first people to defend it, but probably not.
Right.
Like that's like, we come to art with our perspectives, and it's all individual and it's all conditional and it's contextual, and a big part of that is how is a movie's legacy developed, or a piece of art's legacy developed, when you're first coming to it, and like when are you seeing it. And I think an important part of me like rewatching, I think the rewatch is when a lot of my thoughts on this were really cemented. Rewatching this like now, like fully about with all of like the social and political events and movements of the past year and a half firmly in my mind, I rewatch this movie and I come out with my thoughts like more solidified on what I think is going on here.
Well, there you have it. The Rage Carrie 2 is a product way ahead of its time. I
really do think so, actually.
It just needed to come out 20 years later. And
yeah. But then there wouldn't have been new metal on the soundtrack.
That's true. I mean, for me, that's one of the things that I appreciate more about it, is the fact that it is very much a time capsule into that decade. It is very, very 90s. All right. I think that's going to do it for this month. Thank you so much for listening. Let us know what you want us to cover next month by dropping us a DM or email at 90s@filmpulse.net. If you could be so kind, consider dropping us a review on iTunes, as that would be extremely helpful. We'll be back next month, but until then, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at 90spod for daily 90s goodness. For Ken Bakley, my name is Adam Patterson, and this has been Saved by the 90s.
Bye, everyone.